only feels natural to have videos begin at Pine Junction. We're set up in Gary at the west end of Canadian National's Yard to catch a CSX train powered by a Dash 9 and 3 SD40 variants, just about as good as trains can get. We'll chase this train west and set the stage for our 2026 visit to the B&OCT. At Airport Road, the train is now on their extremely short run on the CN's Matson subdivision and will be connecting onto home rails immediately southwest of here. For many years, the CSX maintained a daily turn job between their own Barr Yard and the former EJ&E Yard. In this case, 2 days' worth of backlog traffic are now running with a recrew as a combined westbound back to Barr. From here, we'll chase the train to Todd Avenue in East Chicago and get an uninterrupted look at the entire train on home rails. Beginning in the spring of 2026, CSX rolled out a series of major operational changes across the Midwest which, perhaps most notably, led to the curtailing of a significant amount of operations in and around the railroad's large Barr Yard and Riverdale, with intermediate switching being shifted entirely to Chicago's belt railways, and Barr Yard only being used to switch and deliver local industry traffic and host the occasional interchange of unit train traffic between the CSX and other railroads around Chicago. These daily transfers to and from the CN were one of the services eliminated with the shift, with manifest trains now running directly to and from Yard, and other traffic being switched by way of the IHB and BRC. In this video, we'll be taking a look at current operations on the B&OCT and a few of the many changes in rail traffic that have resulted. We'll begin by taking a look back and follow several of these CN transfers to Barr Yard, trains that have become, as the Smithereens might say, only a memory in modern railroading. The next day finds us along the Barr subdivision again, this time at the line's crossing with the Indiana Harbor Belt at Calumet Tower. Perhaps being short on power, Barr Yard has turned the lead two transfer engines we saw yesterday on today's train M566, which at the time of recording in September of 2022 was the daily Barr Yard to Cleveland, Ohio manifest. Even though this was nearly 4 years ago, SD40-2 liters were close to impossible to catch on any manifest, but the former Conrail 6473 seemed to have no problem operating as it was built to 44 years prior. years, the M566 service has had various destination changes, but always fulfilled the purpose of being the primary eastbound manifest out of Barr Yard. A large amount of traffic on this M566 consists of interchange traffic from the Indiana Harbor Belt, plenty of industry traffic from various B&OCT shippers, as well as the railroad's former Rock Island operations west of Chicago. We've moved just about 2 miles west on the Barr subdivision to catch another Kirkyard transfer returning west. The overnight crew ran out of time and tied the train down here at Hammond a few hours prior, and a recrew has just boarded to pull up the remainder of its trip back to Barr Yard. An eclectic array of EMD powers on today's train, featuring an SD40-2, 2 SD40-3 rebuilds, as well as an SD50. The crew will not make it very far before stopping for a good amount of cross-traffic at State Line another mile west of here. Another unseasonably warm early spring day finds a high green for another CN transfer at State Line. Today's train, as well as the Railroad Avenue overpass we saw earlier, can be seen in the far distance to the east. A daylight Y135 crew has run the complete turn to the CN and back today and is returning to Barr Yard behind 2 rebuilt SD40-3s and an ET44 AC Chivo. The CSX 4049 was rebuilt in late 2012 and was originally built as L&N SD40-2 number 8081. We'll catch up with this Y135 a bit later on at Barr Yard. It's now September of 2024 as a light Y310 returning from the CN ducks under the South Shore's, at the time, still under construction Westlake Corridor near State Line. Like Pine Junction, Dalton is another railroad location no video of mine would be complete without, and we'll be spending quite a bit more time here later on. The short Y310 from the CN is on the final stretch of its journey back to Barr behind two more SD40-2s, the leader being the former Conrail 6370. Late 2023 into mid-2024 seemed to be a good time to catch these trains in daylight, and a little bit of patience on the disgruntled cameraman's part would prove to be worthwhile just about every time I decided to spend time along the B&OCT. This 20-car train is abnormally short for these CN transfers, which at times could be over 100 cars in total train length. It's now 2 years later in late March 2026. Barr Yard will come close to being totally shut down in just a few weeks' time as train M357 gets moving on the final leg of their trip to the yard. Rather sickly sounding horn on the CSX 7224, which is classified by the railroad as a rebuilt CM44AC and was originally built as CSX AC44CW number 171 in May of 1996. At the time of filming, this M357 was a daily manifest from Columbus, Ohio to Barr Yard, and today's train is a measly 22 cars in total train length. Though I didn't have much of any clue of what was to come at the time of filming, this may have been due to the yard winding down operations for what was to come. The M357 continues to operate daily from Columbus, but now has the final destination of the Belt Railway of Chicago at Clearing Yard. From here we'll head around the corner to Riverdale and Barr Yard. Less than a mile west by rail from Dalton is the Perry Avenue grade crossing on the far east end of Barr Yard. When these scenes were shot in March of 2024, the yard's fuel pad was full of power and the classification yard in the far background was packed to the brim with freight cars. The Y-135 job from Kirkyard we saw earlier at Hammond is on the last leg of their trip into Barr Yard. The interlocking in the immediate background is Riverdale, and the former Illinois Central can be seen overhead. The train is passing the yard's car shop, where carmen are hard at work switching and repairing bad-ordered freight cars. We'll follow the tail end of the train to Halstead Avenue in the heart of Barr Yard. The Y-135 is just about completely yarded as we get a look at Barr Yard under a hazy March sunset. What I did not expect to see walking up the bridge was a yard job laying on its side. I have no idea what happened to this yard switcher, but I'm sure it would end up being a very long night for halter and yard personnel. At the time, normal operations could find 3 separate yard switchers working per shift, and that was the case this evening. In the meantime, train M642 from Avon, Indiana can be seen yarding with freight from the Indianapolis Metro. From here we'll head to the far west end of the yard at Ashland Avenue. At the west end of Barr Yard, the public access road to Calumet Woods and the Blue Island soccer fields provides a great view of the west yard leads. Transfer power from the BRC is waiting for clearance back into the yard underneath the shadow of Interstate 57. A west end yard switcher is pulled out to begin working a new cut of cars in the yard. Though this was filmed in March of 2023, the 1700 series SD40 E3 rebuilds have been commonplace on Barr Yard switchers for many years. These are essentially the same locomotives as Canadian Pacific's SD30C Eco rebuilds, and the 1708 was rebuilt from CSX SD40-2 number 8082. Tied onto their next track and on the pole, we hear some EMD 710 music as the 1708 works hard getting moving. Note this job is remote controlled. This is how it was at Barr Yard. The yard switcher will continue working late into the night while we flash forward just over 3 years, and by May of 2026, the yard would provide a radically different railroad landscape. May 3rd, 2026. Rainstorms have just cleared, leading to a quiet, if not slightly somber, Sunday afternoon on the Halstead overpass over Barr Yard. Looking north, we glimpse the famous Willis Tower in downtown Chicago, and below, a westbound stack train is passing on the main while an empty coke train sits quietly waiting a new crew to pull it east. If you're questioning your eyes right now, you're not alone. Time runs long, days go by, and landscapes, railroad or otherwise, do nothing but change. The yard now only feeds B&OCT Industries, the traffic of which can fit into less than 6 full yard tracks. As the skies begin to break into sunshine, we'll head back to the west end for what little action remains at the yard. The parking lot of a public boat launch provides a good view of the west end of Barr Yard from the north side. Not great for sun, but good enough to watch what now little toiling goes on at the yard. Signs continue to warn employees to be cautious of RCO equipment, but it is unlikely that any remote-controlled yard jobs will be working here anytime soon. The Indiana Harbor Belt now feeds the entirety of Barr Yard in the form of their 517 job from Blue Island. Today's train is a mere 19 cars of industry inbounds for Barr. Lined into the yard, the 517 begins their pull behind 2 GP40-2s. The IHB 4014 is the former Southern Pacific 7616, while the 4016 was built as SP 7613. The 517 job is passing local CSX power in the form of rebuilt GP40-3 6578. This is a newer CSX-3 rebuild without the square cab and is the railroad's former 6437. Following immediately behind the IHB turn, a CSX-trained B420. Petcoke empties from Evansville, Indiana, bound for BP's large refinery at Whiting. This is just about as busy as the yard can get these days, and moments like these are few and far between. You can't argue with CSX SD70 Max, especially leading trains. CSX 4541 was built as the railroad's 741 in November of 1999 and renumbered in the late 2000s to not conflict with the numbering of a GEVO order. These pet coke trains, routed by way of Barr Yard, is a new service due to a bridge strike in Indiana, and there will be an entirely separate video covering these new operations coming very soon. We'll return to the Halstead overpass and make our best attempt to not get motion sickness from today's now very high winds. The empty coke train is being tied down at the east end of Barr for a yard job to deliver to the refinery later on this week. If you've seen my original B&OCT video, the CSX 90057 is no stranger. Despite everything around it changing, the old chassis caboose still sees regular use as a shoving platform in and out of Barr Yard. Not much remains in any direction as we're 4 for 4 with cars and locomotives being serviced at the east end of the yard. Haven't forgotten the IHB as the skies decide to let there be light on the 517's venerable pair of GP40s. Crew will run light power back to Blue Island by way of Dalton Junction. Other railroads running on CSX trackage operate with Z symbols, and this 517 will be operating as train Z374 over the main. From here we'll head back to Dalton Junction and look for more changes to the rail scene that have resulted. Some things haven't changed at all as just another ubiquitous IHB autorack train to the BNSF from Gibson Yard rolls west of Dalton. The 517 has escaped Barr Yard and will return to home rails just east of here at the Cottage Grove connection. A short signal for an eastbound has popped up while we wait for the 517 to return. Looking west, we catch the culprit of the eastbound signal. CSX job Y101 has just delivered outbounds to the IHB at Blue Island and is now making the reverse of the move we just saw. Due to reciprocal switching agreements, both IHB and B&OCT crews take interchange traffic to the other's yard and return light power to their home bases. Today's transfer to the IHB is operating with 2 rebuilt SD40-3s. The crew will return to Barr Yard, and we'll return to Dalton on another day for more B&OCT action. On a less windy day at Dalton, Job Y126 has gone to work and will do some industry work here in town. If you recall the original B&OCT video, this job continues to serve the same function as the Barr Yard-based industry switcher. The train is led by the same 6578 we saw earlier and does indeed have the old chassis system shoving platform in tow today. The crew will run around their train on the main and spot Safety Clean just across the street to the left of frame. Now on the other side of their train, the crew can return to it and spot cars at the plant. Provided you have a long enough camera lens, the back parking lot of Dalton's Public Library provides an excellent view of plant switching at Safety Clean. The crew will first pull cars out before spotting, but not before being passed by a track inspector. I'll take a rare moment to actually be quiet for a few minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the same industry switching that is the first step of moving every car on every 2-mile-long manifest freight you see on the main lines today. With their work and safety clean complete, it's off to more industries for more switching. We'll bid farewell to this Y126 for the day and come back a bit later on in the evening. Looking east on the IHB main, CSX train M565 has swung off the Barr sub east of here and onto the IHB for their Blue Island yard. This is the reverse of the M566 we saw at the beginning of the show, and these Cleveland manifests now originate and terminate at the IHB's Blue Island yard. As CSX road crews aren't qualified to run trains into the yard, an IHB 529 crew is boarded to pilot it the short remainder of its journey. With this M565 into the yard, we'll bid farewell to Dalton Junction and head back toward the west end of Barr Yard and Harvey Junction at Blue Island. It's an abnormally hot May Saturday and we're at the Blue Island soccer fields in Calumet Woods along the west end of Barr Yard. A loaded CPKC ethanol train is entering Barr Yard for a recrew to run the train east. This train departed the CPKC's Bensonville yard early this morning and originated as their train 546 from one of many online ethanol plants on the railroad system to the west. Despite being on foreign rails nearly their entire day, this is in fact a CPKC crew operating as train Z014 on the CSX, and a CSX crew will be arriving at Barr shortly to run the train east to CSX train B725 to New Jersey. Behind the ethanol train, another Y126 has gone to work and is today headed to switch industries on the railroad's Chicago Heights branch. From here we'll head another mile west to Harvey Junction. At Harvey Junction, a Y funnels the railroad's Chicago Heights branch into the B&OCT main. A connection with the IHB exists a mile south of here, and this is the method of transit for transfers between the two railroads. The Y-126 is broken off the main and onto the branch with 3 cars for quality metals at Dixmoor. We've moved geographically north back to the main at Chatham Street. Looking east and simply speaking, yard leads break off to the right while the main stays at left. It was another so-called busy day at Barr Yard with the Y-126 and Z-014 we just saw, as well as the Iowa Interstate, who recrewed an empty ethanol train for loading on the railroad to the west. A lone Iowa Interstate GE came down earlier today, and the crew is now returning to their Burr Yard in Blue Island as train Z-037. Before Barr Yard's reduction in operations, the Iowa Interstate maintained a daily job to interchange both manifest as well as unit traffic with the railroad. Runs to the CSX now only happen to deliver and pull these ethanol trains and are as needed. From here we'll track back east to State Line Junction at Hammond. At State Line, the B&OCT main crosses Norfolk Southern's former Nickel Plate Chicago district as well as the Indiana Harbor Belt's Burnham branch at grade, and the main line of the South Shore runs to the immediate north. For years, this junction was just about totally inaccessible, but the South Shore's new Hammond Gateway station has opened up the view quite a bit. A rare daylight transfer to the IHB's Burnham Yard from Blue Island is on the final leg of their trip to Burnham behind another pair of former Southern Pacific GP40-2s. The 4018 is leading and is the former SP7615. Burnham Yard is home to several daily industry switchers, and this entire train consists of cars destined for local industries. The CPKC ethanol loads we saw at the west end of Barr have since gotten a CSX crew on board and are now on the move as train B725 destined for the East Coast. These loaded ethanol trains are heavier than you might think, and the 2 unrebuilt AC-44s on the head end are working hard getting the train up to track speed. The train is passing under the South Shore's Monon Corridor, which commenced operations in the spring of 2026. It's now April and we're in the parking lot of the old Hammond South Shore Station, now overflow parking for the new Gateway Station to the west. The B&OCT serves as the south border of the parking lot while the South Shore Main is north. The old Hammond Depot still sits unused with, to my knowledge, no definite plans for future use or sale. A favorable signal for a freight train to run through the new Hammond Gateway Station. Sliding down Calumet Hill to the east is South Shore Freight Job AF11, which is headed to the BRC with a train of traffic destined for the CSX. Though I neglected to show it in recent videos, the South Shore Freight did in fact return to interchanging with the CSX in East Chicago in the summer of 2025. This train was originally intended to interchange there, but was rerouted due to the changes at Barr Yard and the repurposing of its Whiting branch for refinery traffic. CSX-bound interchange traffic is now routed by way of the BRC as well as the Indiana Harbor Belt at Burnham Yard. Back at State Line, IHB Job 190 is on the shove with a long train of interchange bound for the South Shore. Almost all of this traffic arrived on the M565 trains we saw earlier. A much smaller 4-car train of outbounds will return to the IHB's Burnham Yard. 190 will have to wait here at State Line for another IHB job to get out of the way on the Burnham branch before pulling south to shove north into the yard. The culprit is an auto transfer from the railroad's Gibson Yard on the shove to Norfolk Southern's Mixing Center just west of here at Hegewisch. With the auto rack train out of the way, the South Shore interchange job can return to their own Burnham Yard. From here we'll head another mile and a half east to one of my favorite locations on the B&OCT, the South Shore Flyover and west end of Pegasus Yard along Hudson Street. The Rust Belt landscape of northwest Indiana is ever present here at the west end of Pegasus Yard this cool May afternoon. While the overhead view isn't the greatest, you'll never be bored here with the constant stream of CSX and South Shore traffic. Coming out of the west end of Pegasus Yard is CSX Y229, the yard's evening industry switcher. Two locals are working out of East Chicago this evening, this Y229 on the south side and a Y201 crew to the north. Operational needs vary day to day, and tonight's crew will first be headed light engine to Barr Yard to pick up inbound Pegasus Yard industry cars. All on the main with the switch restored, the Y229 heads west to Barr. Power on this evening's train is CSX GP38-2 number 2613, which was built as L&N 4105 in March of 1973. Immediately following Y229 is job Y201 with a long train of sulfur loads from BP's large refinery north of here at Whiting. These trains are a new service to the railroad, which now serves the plant exclusively as a bridge strike in April cut off both the IHB and Canadian National's access to the refinery. Like the Pegasus yard laid on the south side of the line, the north side is also protected by a hand-throw switch and must be manually lined for train movements onto and off the main. Power on today's train is a rebuilt CM44AH, working hard to get the nearly 100-car loaded train moving onto the main. Now totally onto the main, the conductor will realign the switch for mainline movement and head up to the head end for their short journey to Barr Yard. On another day along Hudson Street, we catch a Y101 transfer job heading to Pegasus Yard with a train of inbound industry cars for the yard. This is the same function the Y229 served earlier, though they didn't get back from Barr until well after dark. Note the 2613 is equipped with a rather unique and very loud hybrid K5LA air horn. Just like earlier, the switch into Pegasus will have to be manually realigned once the train is totally into the yard. The day has grown much later, and we've stuck it out here at Hudson Street for more rail action only the B&OCT can provide. Another M565 destined for the IHB is westbound, making their way through East Chicago in the distance. The train will connect onto the IHB at Calumet Park Junction, 3 miles west of here by rail. As it's now the mid-evening, the South Shore is quite busy overhead with rush hour trains carrying the Northwest Indiana working class back home after another day of business in the city. Not long after, 3 EMDs are hard at work loading today's inbound train off the BRC up Calumet Hill on the South Shore. The train is being passed below by eastbound stack train I-104 on the CSX. While just about everything has changed at Barr Yard, intermodal traffic from both the railroad's Bedford Park and 59th Street terminals is operating just about as it has been. The sun is falling low to the west as we lens our last train of the video, another Y201 job from Whiting to Barr Yard. While the conductor gets back up to the head end, we'll follow the train to the Hammond Gateway Station and close out our look at 2026 operations on the B&OCT. A beautiful spring evening at State Line along the South Shore. Our previous location can be vaguely made out in the distance to the east as the Y201 gets moving toward Barr. 2026 has brought major cuts to Barr Yard and the existing B&OCT terminal. One tiny glimmer of hope are these new refinery trains on the railroad's now totally revitalized Whiting branch. You might recall my rather overboard amount of nostalgia I have with the otherwise obscure branch line, so of course, we'll be covering these changes and the new trains in depth in a separate video coming out very soon. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed coming along for the ride to explore the ever-changing modern railroad operations of Chicago, and as always, thanks for watching.